Hello, welcome to another episode of the Great Work Launchpad. My name is Chris Nelson. My site is evolveconsciousness.org. Today is December 31st, New Year's Eve, 2025, 9 p.m. as usual. And, hold on a second. Forgot to do my microphone. Forgot to do my video ninja thing. Sorry about that. Yeah, here it is. Normally I post that link before. Forget where I was at, but I think I was just at the introduction. So I was saying another episode of the Great Work Launchpad. Episode 35. 35, yes. Part 33. Fear or Love. 18. Why to Begin. 3. And, So the Great Work Launchpad, just a little spiel. We're trying to get people more involved in doing the great work. And the great work is about, as is shown here, the truth, love, and freedom. Trying to live through truth and be in that embodiment of love. Hence the 18th series of Fear or Love, what motivates you. And that will bring us towards freedom. So trying to get people into that. And welcome back, Brandon. Glad to have you here. How's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
All right. So I'll just continue the little intro and plug some stuff. The Great Work Launchpad. People can come on, voice their, contribute to the topic of discussion, try to add more knowledge to provide understanding, and especially those who are looking to get into the great work but might be shy or apprehensive or need to get their toes wet. They can use this as an avenue to come on and try to be engaged in the process of creating live content. And of course, there's other forums that aren't as pressure demanding. You can do recordings and take your time, have a script. You can do writing. If you want help with any of that, you can contact me and I'll see if I can guide you a bit to get started. And what was I here? No, not here. I seem to be lost. This one. Right. Okay. How to be the true media. I think sign up ends tonight, midnight. Yeah, midnight at 1 a.m. So you can learn some skills. Learn them on their own or take tutelage from Mark Passio on how to organize. Well, you got all the points there. Get organized in your computer, since most people have probably put all their desktops on, all their icons, all their installations on their desktop, and their desktop is their main place where they go. I have nothing. I have no screens on my background. I have no icons on my background. Organize your stuff, learn how to get organized, learn how to basic computing skills work if you lack it, or go learn it from someone else. Passio offers a good course to help you get accelerated in that and do it in an efficient manner. 23 weeks, long-term investment, but well worth it. And we also got a conference coming up in February, Freedom Under Natural Law 5, Ignite Hearts and Minds. So you can check out freedomundernaturalllaw.com for more information about that. Alrighty. So the last episode was, we didn't get to continue into the original topic of conversation. We kind of went, some tangents. Nick came on and we started talking about other stuff. So the one before that, 16, we got into one of the big reasons why to begin doing the great work. And, overall, we've been talking about fear or love. And that's the overall reason is because you want to embody that aspect of love, of care, the care for all beings, being free from harm, that wider compassion and identification beyond you and those around you and those you personally identify with. So you're motivated to create freedom for all, and you're willing to do sacrifices of your time and other things in order to try to bring that forth. Not that it will happen necessarily in even your own lifetime. So you got to be honest with yourself. Don't get started because you're like, yeah, I'm gonna be free. I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna get my freedom. No, it's probably not gonna happen. But the more people who do make it happen, the more we will get to that point where you can potentially have a majority of the people who understand it and then can act in unison with that understanding, and the majority of behavior will be changed. And then we could really accelerate towards getting our true freedom and learning to cohabitate cooperatively on this planet. So the first one we went through 3 weeks ago was the great works. A requirement for true freedom. Our world needs more voices speaking the truth, that your public work will help to awaken others, and in doing so, that work will contribute to the effort of ending human slavery on Earth. So that's pretty powerful as a reason to, not a reason as like an excuse we were using with the negative excuses. We did the previous 4 episodes before that. But the understandings, the truth-based understandings for why you should begin. And in that episode, I talked about how there's no higher purpose than restoring and preserving freedom and ending human slavery and keeping it that way, and how that is our common purpose that we all share, and it's our birthright to have freedom. So that when you recognize that our birthright is freedom and it's being denied to us, that's our common birthright. Our common purpose is to restore that birthright that we all have, to have our natural rights respected. And then we have that consequence of our natural rights respected. That means morality is in operation at maximum force, and therefore true freedom is present because there are no false claims of ownership through the violation of our natural rights. And then what we have is that true freedom as a resulting state through the moral behavior. And yeah, so we're going to continue from there. And last episode talked about, I had a bit of notes, like we talked about how people are watching and they don't get involved. It's like entertainment, it's a spectator sport. They're just like watching it as a movie, and they, Brendan mentioned like conferences, and people watch conferences and they just keep watching conferences and they don't get involved. Yeah, and I think I mentioned that people, well, they don't care enough. They can care enough to learn about it. They can care enough to pay attention and give their attention and time to like other people presenting things like a conference. But they don't truly care enough about themselves or others being enslaved to use that care. And that's what that fire under this truth, love, freedom, this great work is. That fire is the care. And that's what love, in the polarity of love or fear, is what motivates us. That's that care is what's driving us. And some people don't have it ignited enough. It's not, it could be like an ember or a little flame, but it's not a raging inferno, a jet propelling us forward in our actions. And I think Nick mentioned stuff about people talking about they don't want to speak out because it risks their projects, or it's not the time for other people to wake up, so they don't bother talking about things or something like that. Anyways, there was a lot of topics covered last week, but now we'll get into one of the top 4 reasons. This is reason number 2, as Mark Passio explained it in his I think it was 241, 242 podcasts on shadow work, nonetheless. So this is that your effort when you engage in the great works. This is an understanding, a true understanding of why you should begin doing the great work, is that this effort to do the great work can inspire others to become involved, and that your work may inspire others to speak out, who in turn may awaken more individuals. And that's what we're doing here. We're trying to create content that can provide this understanding and bring this understanding towards people so that then they can use that understanding. So this is the trivium process as well. And I have an infographic on, I call it Care for Truth, and it has a heart. And at the center is care. And then you're at, I'll go with the way the camera is. You got your knowledge, your grammar, your input, and then that goes, you have to seek the truth, and then you can understand. That's the second part of the trivium. So you're taking in the truth, you're accepting it. And then the wisdom part is you're living the truth, you're embodying it, and then you're teaching it. And this is what has happened to us. Most of us probably through Mark Passio, is how we got motivated. And there's also that fire, lighting a fire under people's asses is also like a kick in the ass of harsh truths about how you're failing, how you're not being good enough. If you want to be a truly good person, you're going to be more aligned with that force of love as opposed to the force of fear. And I refer to it in some of my work as immorality level 2, because if you're not serving the higher morality, the basic morality is don't steal, the 7 major thefts. So that's just basic morality. If you want to get higher morality, you have to combat against evil, not just not create it yourself. That's basic morality. But if you're going to be in the combat against evil, against the creation of evil, that's when you do the great work. And that's why it's a higher morality. And it takes more effort. It's not a passive inaction where you stop doing the thefts. This is about actively engaging in behaviors. So you're putting things out in that wisdom stage, the rhetoric, the output. And that's what we're doing. And we can, as has been done to us, well, we were inspired and we could inspire others. We're going to explain things that other people might not come across it. They might not come across Passio, or they might not come across it being said in a different way. And so those people can be influenced to care more, and they can be inspired, and they can start to speak out. So you speaking to someone or creating some content can influence someone else to do that very same process. And maybe someone along the way becomes greatly influential to even more people. So it's not a guarantee. And just by you speaking, it could be that no one is influenced. But if you don't try, then it's sure as hell that no one's going to be influenced, because you're not even trying to bring that potential into reality as something that could manifest. The manifestation of someone being influenced requires the output process in order for that influence to be possible. So this is a long-term process that we can engage in. Everyone has to do their part. Just by you changing or not doing things or doing certain things isn't going to make the world change on its own. But you, as one unit in that chain, one part of the whole, has an effect even if you can't see it. You're part of the solution. When you engage in the great work, you're acting in a solution causal capacity, where you're part of the solution because you're putting out the information that can potentially be accessed to increase the awareness of other people to potentially engage in that same process. And if no one did it, no one would be getting involved, and it would be a total impossibility for freedom to manifest. So the more people that do it, the more potential exists for that eventuality to come about. Brandon, what you got to say about that?
It's crazy because you never know who you will inspire, when you start to get involved, you just look at, the work of Passio, and if he didn't start speaking, what would it have done, as far as all of our understanding and all of the individuals who he has inspired. And then, same thing with your work. Your work has inspired a lot of other, content creators and a lot of individuals. So, like just like when we're doing this work, we may not necessarily see, the end game goal as freedom, but when it, like comes to inspiring people, we may not necessarily see it, but the individual who you do inspire, they know it. So that's one of the main reasons, why you should get involved, because you do have the capacity to help change and inspire, others. You never know who the individual is. He'll just like the young lady from India, who's come on here a few times. She was inspired by Chris's work. Like that is what we are trying to do, is inspire others so, they can learn to take that inner flame and have it burn, like a torch. Because sadly, that internal flame for most people is just a little match, and with all of the materialistic and societal winds trying to blow it out, and all the other elements, because all the other three elements, earth, water, um, air can put out fire. Water can put out fire, earth can smother fire, and of course, air can blow it out. So we have all those elements that are being bombarded, held against the individual to put that flame out and have that flame die out. But when you inspire people, then you give that flame, you know, the tools so it can stay alive and it can burn bright. And we need that inner flame to burn like a torch. And people think that having the loudest voice is really what gets heard. That is true in some degree, but when we talk about the loudest voice, it's not about being have the loudest. It's about the amplification of that voice. And if there were 10 people talking, hell about natural law, that's not enough. But then if there are 1,000 people talking about it, then that voice gets amplified. If there were 100,000 people talking about morality and natural law, then the amplification gets greater and greater. Now, if there was 1,000,000 people talking about how natural law, then that voice gets heard even further. And that's what we need, is we need more voices that are willing to amplify this message. And it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't even matter, like what your past is. Anyone can do this kind of work. It just takes the care, it takes the willpower, and it takes the dedication. And of course, you have to have the knowledge on what you are going to speak about. And at the end of the day, you are contributing to the advancement of mankind and the evolution of consciousness, because there is no evolution for mankind without morality. So you are actually giving yourself up to a true greater good, which Chris has talked about in earlier episodes, something that is actually worth something. And believe it or not, this isn't just for humanity. When you do this kind of work, it helps all life, because we ain't just talking about freedom for our species, freedom for all life. So you're actually doing a service for creation. You're doing a service for all life forms. You're doing a service for nature. So you're actually giving yourself up to the highest greater good that one can possibly, help give yourself up to. And that is the sacrifice. That is the sacrifice. But yes, that fire, that passion, that needs to be understood, so that flame doesn't die out. So that flame doesn't get extinguished. And we need more of that burning passion. We need more individuals that are willing to care and get involved. And that right there takes inspiration. And that's really why we keep coming on here, is to try to inspire Even if it's only one or two people, you never know, because that one person who you may inspire, they may inspire thousands of people. They may inspire tens of thousands of people. You never know who is going to be that individual who can, take anyone's work and go deeper. Just like Chris is going deeper with, how Pastio's work. You never know who that individual is going to be. And that's why you want to get involved, is because you can be that person who inspires others to get involved. And that right there has an even more lasting effect and an even more deeper connection and a bond, you know?
Yeah, well said. Oh, why is this here? Um, yeah, one thing I want to talk about a bit was the theme of this series of why to begin. So there was which one? This was the first one. It was the path we're walking, the great journey to get to the end, what we're trying to create. And then I had this one as another construction. We're all, ideally we're all jubilant, and we're trying to create something um, that is a great work, and everyone's involved in creating it. And we're all heading towards that construction, the thing we're constructing. And this one as well is, it's this idea of we're building something monumental, reaching up to the heavens. This idea, this concept of the heavens. It's associated with the Elysium, the paradise, and I also associate with the afterlife. So biblically, it's all symbolism to me. That the afterlife is the after life, as I have here. It sort of hints at this. At the bottom here, it says the work of the living in white, as opposed to the work of the dead when you're in apathy for truth. Well, that's what the symbolism is of when you care for truth, you're going to be more awake. You're going to be revived. So that's what I have here. This wake up call, this clarion call. The card of judgment is, the symbolism of the people who don't have that care awakened. That fire is just like a spark or a match, as Brandon said. And there's this call, this trumpet call. The truth awakens you. There's something that clicks, that snaps within you, and is making you rise out of the coffin from that deadened state. And that's what a lot of this symbolism is that we have in allegories like the Bible here. The dead is that, this also in Masonic allegory of Hiram Abiff. So you're being resurrected from your coffin because you're dead, and this work of the living. And so I'm trying to tie this all to the afterlife. And I think I had a slide where I had that in quotes, but I don't know if it's this one. But anyways, there's like a dichotomy of people who do the evil work, the dark false carers, the light true carers, the ones who are trying to create true freedom, and those who are in the middle, who are unbegun, dead, and uninitiated. They're not like reanimated dead or whatever. They're in the coffin there in the middle, and that's most of the people who are not engaged in either side of the work. They're not engaged actively in the side of creating a hell. They're not engaged actively in the side of creating a heaven. And the symbolism of the heaven, this paradise, this afterlife, is because it's the life that comes after. That's the image before that. Here it is. It's the life that comes after your life as you have it now, and you're resurrected into true care. So your life as it is now, before you become more awakened and engaged into that I'm not going to say the fullest capacity, but it's a higher potential capacity of care where you're ignited enough to be engaged. Um, you're not, you haven't reached that level of truly being alive as much as you can be. And so, the dead symbolism, and when you're aligned with morality to the point where you're becoming a truer, realer, higher version of yourselves, well, then you're initiated, you're awake and aware, and you begin trying to end evil, not just your own participation in it, which is that basic lower level morality, but that higher level morality where you're trying to end evil everywhere. And that's when you're truly resurrected and risen. So I liken it to when you begin the journey, when you begin to care about truth and begin that spiritual journey or that knowledge quest, however you want to term it. That's more like where your eyes become open, and you're like, maybe you're leaning up from the coffin, but you haven't stood up yet. You haven't walked out of the coffin yet. All right. So I'm trying to give these steps to this whole process. And when you're really resurrected and you're risen, rebirthed, reborn, and raised from that deadened lower state. So again, there's like these levels, but I'm talking about that higher level when you're really out. That's when you're risen, when you rise to a higher, truer, realer consciousness in life. And now you're alive and you have a new life as opposed, so it's a new version of yourself contrasted to the older version of yourself, which was a lower version of yourself, and now you're at a higher version of yourself. And that's an afterlife, because it's a life after that former version of yourself, that former state of being of your existence that you were at. And now you're at a higher life. So that's that symbolism of the heavens and rising up. So that's the afterlife, and it's a new world. Now you see things differently. The world doesn't look the same. So that's that new world, and that this is all given to us by the light and the life of truth and morality. Hence I clicked too many. Yeah, the light, right? The sun in the sky. Well, that's symbolism of the light and the truth and morality, and that is the life. That's why the allegory, again, this is like the biblical allegory. Well, Jesus was the Son of God. Well, that's the sun, the light, and that's the life giver, because without the sun there is no life. There's no plant life. Animals die because it's all based on plants existing so that they can be consumed. That's the closest to the source of light you can get into the life forms to consume. And so that light and life, that's what Jesus, was parabolized as I am the light, I am the life, things like that. I am the truth. Well, these are all allegories for how the sun symbolized that as the life giver. And when we talk about symbolism of the sun, well, that's the rays of the sun. Well, that's the knowledge that's being absorbed and we receive it, and that's giving us life. So all this is all symbolism to tie it into, if I go back to here, well, this is what we're trying to create, right? We're trying to reach that heaven, to create a heaven on earth. Not that there's actually a heaven somewhere or a paradise somewhere or an afterlife somewhere. I'm not talking about that, even if it does exist. I don't think it does, but hey, who knows? I'm talking about, it's all an allegory about how you can make sense of a common purpose we have here on earth, because this is where we exist, and all these stories are encoding it, and it's not explicitly said, and you have to look at it in an encoded way and decipher it because it's symbolic in mythopoetic through words and narratives and stories and allegories and metaphors. It's analogizing something in certain terminology that correlates to another understanding that's deeper and occulted. It's actually occulted. And for whatever reason, they did it to encode an understanding through a story that mirrors the understanding so that you can understand the thing that's truly worth understanding through a story that can make a little more sense. And it encodes it at the same time. so that people don't like squash it or try to burn it and stamp it out of existence. That could be a possible reason, but so you can have people like us here trying to give the information in its direct form as what the encoding represents, and that's what the image here is like. We're trying to build ourselves up to that higher state and reach the point where we can create a heaven on earth, create a paradise, reach that afterlife of how people view everything is so good and wonderful and peaceful, everything's just great. We could reach a state that's more or less like that if enough of us get involved, and overall everyone changes and we all end up aligned on that that way of living. And there's different forms it could take, but the main one that is unequivocally the same is that it's based in moral behavior. So there's all variations, like the last episode I mentioned Star Trek and things like that. So there's different ideas of how you can do things differently in a more idealized world. I'm not saying Star Trek was like this ideal that we're trying to reach, but the different ways of doing things is what I'm talking about. So there's different ways, but the core one that we have to respect and adhere to is a moral path, objective morality, and live that. And as we live it, then we can, as Brendan mentioned, we talked about before, this is all about the progression of humanity, the evolution of humanity, and all the potential that's being restricted from us, and where we can go as individuals and together, all working towards our individual betterment and our collective betterment, under morality, not under some bullshit collectivism of the so-called greater good, but truly the good, serving love, truth, good, right, morality, and trying to reach this better state for everyone, for all of humanity. Do you want to add anything else, Brandon?
Yeah, I was never a big Star Trek fan, but wasn't Star Trek kind of like a representation of government, like in a sense with Enterprise?
Well, there was government because there's the whole Starfleet, and there
Yeah,
was ranks. So, you had
yeah,
captains and lieutenants, and
yeah,
so it
and
was
they
all
would go
ranked, and
around,
yeah.
yeah, and they would go around what the galaxies kind of bringing their own means of way of life.
Well, there was this aspect of a non-interventionist, the prime directive aspect, where you
Okay, yeah.
don't make contact with. So they had, they could have warp travel, so they could travel faster than light and
Mm.
things.
I guess
So
the
they,
warp travel was kind of like a representation of where they was on the intelligence level.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah. So they
okay.
still had like authority, but it was supposed. So the reason I was bringing it up last week was this aspect of how we could do things differently, and so there's no money anymore, and you choose to do things to better all of humanity. So I guess Starfleet was a way of helping to defend yourself and other planets. So you come into treaties, and if you join the Federation, then you're protected by everyone in the Federation will help defend you. And that's like what we're the ideal of a moral world is, if there's a gang coming to harm you, then everyone gangs up themselves and they fight off that gang. And that's what like Starfleet was trying to represent. So yes, there was this authority structure, and it could be corrupted by individuals who could gain power, and then they'd seek to exploit it for their own means. But yeah, this prime directive was, so if they're not advanced in like warp technology, then you don't go present themselves, you don't make contact with them, because then they're going to be like, oh, give us this technology, help us, save us from this, and save our, like a lot of people view with the alien stuff is like, come save us from ourselves, and yes, you'll be
Yeah.
responsible for us and take care of us. No, that's not the way forward. So they had this prime directive where don't make contact. You only make contact with people who have the same technological capabilities,
It
so that
makes
you're more or
sense.
less at the same technological level. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. As you was talking, the word rise came up because it's like when you say it, you almost phonetically say eyes. Rise. It's almost like the same. Have phonetics, and hell, I'm tall, so when I'm in a group of people, I see like over them. So there is something when it comes to things, being arisen or like height, like how you just see, like you have more vision, like just like when like get into an airplane or something like that. And the higher you go, then you have more vision, So when you are talking about, her rising from that coffin and, her rising and raising consciousness, then that grants more vision, that grants more clarity, So this is why we are trying to inspire people to raise their consciousness and get involved because when you rise and elevate, then you see more. Then the more you elevate, then the more hopefully humanity starts to elevate. And the only reason why I kind of knew about Star Trek because Helen Honor had did a breakdown like years ago, and I had watched it, and it was pretty good. But yeah, the whole allegory with the coffin, and the dead, the dead consciousness, which the consciousness, I would say, it isn't dead. It just needs to be resurrected. It needs to hell, it needs that jolt. It needs that electromagnetic force. It needs that full hot force to, kind of like when your car battery goes, dead and it needs that jump start. It's almost like that's what a lot of individuals need is they need that jolt of electricity, of energy. And sadly, and unfortunately, I think that is only going to come in more, like more friction, but it doesn't have to be that way. But yeah, we need more of a risen base mindset, and elevation, because there's obviously something with elevation and mankind. Because when you look at all the words, and of course, hell is always symbolic of the sun, because that was always of the most high. And then, like Chris said, light, knowledge, like that right there has always been talked about in the mystery schools and in the religious traditions that once man starts to align with those components, then he starts to have a different perspective. He starts to have a different means of thinking, and therefore his vision starts to change. Because he starts to go through that alchemical inner process. So then you see things totally differently and you see things further. And you see things for what they truly are and not, what the like rose colored glasses are, based on your, how dogmatic beliefs. And that's what we really need is more of that elevated mindset and consciousness so that we can help humanity rise from that slumber.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned rose-colored glasses. Well, that's made me think of this one where we gotta poke holes in that false reality that we've been conditioned to think is the reality that we live in, and that's this angel and everything's nice, and green grass and nice trees, but to begin the journey, that's why the negative and chaos is a good teacher. And for a lot of us, I think most of us, chaos, obviously chaos of some kind, but for some people, um, maybe your life has to be on a low end of some kind, alone or destitute, or losing something, and then you maybe have more time, um, and you're trying to figure things out more or something, and then you come across some information, and usually I'd say it's, at least for me, it was information that was negative. It was more on the chaos in the world that's going on, in the form of Alex Jones's documentary Terror Storm. And that's where you get to see behind is like, well, behind the angel, poking holes in this illusory false perception of the world, and what we're seeing behind is this demon, and the sky isn't nice. Things aren't looking nice. It's all like, it looks like, I don't know, sick. The trees might be dying, and that's, oh, I load the same one. Yeah, I guess that's this one I'm looking for. Yeah. So when we get to see the reality as it is, that's when we're ready to actually create the world that we thought we were living in, where everyone thinks everything's peachy keen and all sunshine and rainbows and lollipops and everything's good. Well, you have to destroy that false world view that isn't the way things actually are, and then you see things as actually they are. Oh shit, it's a fucking shithole, and you got a lot of work to do. And then that's this destructive process where you have to destroy the false perception, and then you can see things as they are, and then you can destroy the constructs of the world as it currently is and build something better. And that's what the reverse here is, that then you can finally destroy the evil, the darkness, the negative within you, and then outwardly to then create that heaven in that world where everything is nice and good afterwards. Yeah, I guess I'll move on to the next point. I didn't have much to add there, and maybe we'll continue it in the next episode. A third point for true understanding of why you should begin doing the great work is, we've alluded to it a lot, is if you consider yourself a good person, it's not even a choice to begin doing the great work. Because to stay silent during tyrannical times is to be complicit with evil. And this is something I went into quite deeply in my morality presentation, 8-hour presentation on morality. This idea of being a good person. So as I've mentioned, you have being a basic moral person. Morality level 1 is just when you engage in that passive inaction towards creating evil yourself. And that can make you a basic good person. To be a truly good person, you have to engage in a higher level of morality, an active capacity of trying to end evil. When you're just not creating evil yourself, you're not doing anything to stop others from ending evil. And that's what the great work is trying to end the evil that is being created throughout the world. So if you want to be a good person, we've talked about this before, do you want to be the most moral you can be? Well, then you need to engage in the great work, and ultimately that's all about moral education at the highest level of the great work. So if you want to be a good person, means you want to be a moral person. Do you want to be as moral as you can be? Or just, it's like, whatever, well, that's too much work, so I'll just take my level 1 morality of not engaging in the thefts myself, but, I'll just let evil run amok and continue and maintain its foothold and continue to gain more foothold. I'm not going to do anything to stop that. And that's where this complicit aspect comes in. Because complicit, if I'm not mistaken, has to do with weaving. Because you're weaving things into creation. So when you're complicit with a crime, you're going to be weaving with that person in reality to create something into reality that, in terms of immoral things, it should not be there. So here, complicit, the state of being an accomplice, a partnership in wrongdoing, or an objectionable act, from the Latin complicare, to fold together. Com with together, and plicare, to fold, to weave. So you're folding together, you're weaving together. You think of weaving something, knitting something. There's this yarn that's being interwoven to create a cloth, a shirt, a fabric. You're making something, so you're weaving things together. And that's what complicity is that you're melding your behavior and someone else's behavior, or a bunch of people's behavior. Well, that behavior is creating, that shirt is something being created in reality, and that's whatever your actions have an end. All actions have an end. They have a goal. There's a purpose to it. There's a meaning to it. And when it's like the concept of conspiracy, conspirare, to breathe together. Well, complicity is also associated with that, but I guess it's more visual with it's not just breathing, it's you're weaving together. So you can do it actively, where you're a willing partner, an associate, an accomplice in an act of wrongdoing with another. So let's say it's stealing something, say stealing jewelry from somewhere. Well, you're in on it, you know what you're doing, you're like, all right, let's go steal that. I got my job to do in the stealing of that thing. So it's akin to conspiring or colluding. You're actively creating the aggregate folding or weaving of what happens. So that the what happens, the folding or weaving of that material, well, that's this heist that you're all planning, and you're a part of that heist. You're a participant in weaving the current condition into the fabric of creation. And then there's a passive aspect where it's an involuntary aspect of being complicit. You're unwillingly, or maybe unknowingly, being a partner, an associate, an accomplice in an act of wrongdoing with another or others. You're not conspiring or colluding, like you're not in on the heist. But you're herded along to be part of the aggregate folding or weaving of what happens. Because that's what we are. We're all collectively co-creating the reality, the human reality, this aspect of what exists in the universe that would not exist if humans did not engage in any behavior to make it come into existence. If we didn't exist, there wouldn't be computers, cars, etc. on this planet created by us. So this reality that we live in, we're all co-creating it, and we're all being moved along. We're all like cogs in the machine. That's what the outcome-based education is to become a cog in the machine, just so that you can be trained into a modality of economic survivability, so that you can maintain existence and also produce things that other people can purchase, and just like you are going to purchase things that other people produced. And the ones benefiting from this the most are the parasite class, who don't contribute anything, don't do anything, but they have their schemes of monetary manipulations and other means where they can purchase things for their own benefit, for their own comfort, for their existence. And that's what this whole machine going forward for is, for their own amusement and their own gain. And we're all participating in it, and we're all herded along. So in another slide, I have if there's a water current and all the water moves together in the current, or if you're an animal in a herd and they're all running off, they're all stuck in a valley and they're all going towards a cliff, even if you want to get out and you're stuck in the middle, well, you're still going off that cliff with them. The water stream is still going in the same direction. You're not a water drop that's going to I'm going to jump out and go over here. We're all stuck in this flow of where humanity overall is going as a way of life. And so we're all participants in that weaving of the current condition into the fabric of reality. And that's why this majority aspect matters so much. The majority is what determines what direction the herd is going. So if the herd decides the majority of the herd go here, or the ones at the front, well, the ones behind will follow. Or if a stream, over time, there's enough erosion that like something turning on a bank, well, it could erode through that bank and then the bank won't be there, so it technically changed direction. Well, it takes the majority to participate for the aggregate of that body to change as well. So each one of us who participates is going against that current condition and the fabric of creation that's currently being weaved. And if you're not trying to do something against it, hence the great work of trying to end evil, and the aggregate condition is a promotion of evil, it is a continuation of evil, it's an allowance, a tolerance, a supporting of evil. And what we get is more of that evil, more of that immorality. That's the way of life that we have. And human history is like an up and down and all around, all over the place of trying to reduce it in some capacity and make things better, some other ways make things worse. And the reason it's going so shitty and so ignorantly is because of the ignorance of objective morality. So if more people had that, they could be active participants in trying to steer the course of humanity onto the right path instead of the various wrong paths that we've been continuously struggling with throughout our history. And that's how we are all complicit and we're all participants. We're all folding and weaving the reality. And if you're not doing the great work, you are a complicit participant with evil in this sense. And that's why it's an immorality level 2, as I call it in this presentation. Because the higher morality is trying to do something to end evil. And if you're not doing that, then you're in that force of fear, serving that force of fear by letting evil, letting immorality, letting enslavement continue, and not trying to do anything to stop it. Pass it to you, Brandon.
Now you brought up desktops, you brought up stitching and weaving. These are such dinosaur pieces of technology that most people forgotten about.
Yeah.
It's crazy that you brought up weaving because I was thinking to myself today, it's like, man, like how many people, still know how to stitch and, create those kind of things with the hand, you know. Yeah. But yeah, not doing anything to combat evil is to, like, that's to go along, with the flow. Hell, just like Chris was talking about, with the stream, humanity is going down this stream and sadly is going hell off the cliff. And what we're trying to do is create that erosion, that hell new path to say, hey, let's go hell this direction because that part is wrong and immoral and it's going to lead to more destruction and more chaos. And there is another way to do these things, and sadly we can't do it, alone because like Chris said, if the majority is pulling humanity, then we are all going to suffer from that. It's not like we are here by ourselves. This is a co-creative experience that we are all sharing and experiencing, together. Now, if he was on the island with no one there, then that would be totally different. But that's not the case, So we are trying to teach and inspire people there is another way for this stream of water, hence our consciousness, to flow, you know. And sadly, we are going against the flow of creation. We are going against the will of creation. And that's why there is so much turbulence. That stream that we are going down is one of those rocky, streams, where there's a lot of, rocks and, there's a lot of collision, hell, there's a lot of things being, held, destroyed, for unfortunately. But, that's what we are choosing. That's what we are choosing. And how when it comes to fluidity and flow, there was always, that kind of like feminine essence. And that's why you have to care enough because once you start to care, then you will see, hey, there is a, that different way of doing things. There is a different flow of doing things and living here. There's a different way of being. There's a different way of existence, and that existence has to flow with other people's existence, because if if you're just crashing into, boundaries and walls, that's just going to create more pressure. One thing, about flow is it flows with other things, like water, it constantly finds a way to get inside things. And that's kind of what, we need that level of fluidity. We need that level of care. We need that level of creativity in order for us to see things differently, in order for us to see things clearly and have that vision and be able to, shift that tide to what we say we want and what we claim to want to go. Because most people would say they would want to be free. Most people would say they would not want to enslave others. Well, if that's the case, then why are you not doing it? And, if you claim to be a good person and you are not out there morally educating, then that should be eating you up inside. And I know because that's how, I felt before I got, involved is it was eating me up inside, because I just felt like I was in a state of internal contradiction. Like I felt like it was this tug of war, pulling at me, because I knew the knowledge, but I hadn't, went to that last stage in the trivium, in the form of output to actually care enough. So I know what it's like, and all you have to do is just let it go and just say, fuck it. I mean, because, like, what do you really have to lose? I mean, like, what do you have to lose? If you don't do it, you're going to be, enslaved. And even if you do it, you're possibly still going to be enslaved, but you have the possibility of reaching more minds to help end that slavery. So in actuality, there's only really benefits if you do get involved, you know?
Yeah, the benefits sure as hell outweigh the the negatives or the fears, which is the whole point of this explanation. Is these excuses you come up with. Um, you got to really look at, once you understand the truth of why to begin, and then you compare it to the excuses of why you're not beginning. The understanding of the truth, it blows it out of the water. It's so ridiculous to let yourself be driven in this negative way by these apprehensions, these fears, these doubts, things that are holding you back from starting because you're afraid or you lack confidence, or the excuses, I don't have this skill, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, all these reasons that we come up with, these excuses, these rationalizations that we have for not starting. Once you understand what the goal and the meaning of the purpose behind the great work is, and your participation in it, it's so overwhelming as in terms of importance and what you have to gain or what you have to lose. Um, yeah, there's no choice but to. There's always a choice, but it's like, you got to get over, work on yourself and get over your bullshit and move forward towards getting involved. And at the top right here, this is what most people are in. Is I was thinking of this this morning, or sometime this morning, hanging up laundry, and I'm like, because I had like Passio playing, he was talking about people going around in circles because they don't have the causal factors, they don't have the why. And I was thinking of this infographic that I made of like, yeah, well, this is the life people live. They're ignorant and they don't have the meaning or purpose or reason for, and it's talking about, this making humanity better and serving the betterment of all mankind. That's what this serving of the force of love is it's not just about living, surviving, procreating, enjoying life, and dying. There's no drive forward for humanity in a certain direction when you're just doing that. It's just biological continuation of a species. That's not a higher purpose. That's a basic purpose. That's a very basic survival purpose. And that's what most people are engaged in. And they're being moved along. They are being led. And through that being led in that conditioning, they are complicit to the continuation of the evil and this whole facade of living in a world that isn't actually how things are. It's an illusion of how things are. So there's people moving things downward. That's what this bottom image is about, is that there's these people engaging in a negative capacity to drive things downward. That's the bottom part. So this is representative of the trivium and how each person is this TEA, thoughts, emotions, and actions. And we're like the bottom left is the reality. Everything that's happening goes into us, and then we output back into it, and that's the web of life, the force, the interaction of everything happening in reality. And so there's people pulling things down to more into the negative, and then there's everyone else who's just going along with it because they're just focused on themselves, selfish, egotism, Satanism, just going along with the ride. And there's a few of us who are trying to pull things up, but we're not enough. And so we can't pull things in the right direction because there's not enough pulling it up relative to the people going along and contributing, that complicity, that folding and weaving, their contributions to maintaining things going in the downward direction. So that's what the knowledge is required to get people to realize what they're doing, what they're complicit with, and change that inner mind state and their intention, what they want to do, and that purpose and drive and meaning behind their behaviors, and so they can modify their behaviors towards a new purpose, a higher purpose, a truer purpose, a realer purpose. And that's your realer, higher, truer potential in life and what you can be, your state of being that you can become. All right. Anything you want to say, Brandon, in closing? I guess we'll end it there.
Yeah, when you are led by others, you symbolically turn into lead, and you're weighed down. So go and look at what lead was symbolic of, and you understand how I said that.
For sure. Yeah. Alchemy, Phoenix Reborn. You got to distill yourself. Turn yourself from lead, bronze into silver and gold, the alchemical gold. And talked about that a bit in the earlier parts of the Great Work Launchpad, at least as I referred to it. Alchemical gold is that higher awakened state where you're out of the coffin and you're engaging in the great work. And that's the real gold. All right, I guess we'll end it there and be back next week to maybe touch up on this a little bit and move on to the last point. So that should be the final one on these 4 major points on why to begin doing the great work. So thank you as always, Brandon, for joining and contributing here. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Have a good New Year's Eve and have a good 2026. Hopefully we get more people involved in the great work and more effort output into trying to restore our birthright and state of natural law freedom so that we can actually co-create and survive in a more optimal state together. So have a good one. Take care. Oh wait, I got my Passio outro. Almost forgot about that here. Been forgetting about it a lot. All right. In the immortal words of Mark Passio.
How about trying to get out there and do the actual great work so this world isn't such a fucking hellhole, huh?
There you go. Those are inspiring words to get yourself motivated for 2026.